All right, good morning. It's a little after 9:30. I'm trying to be punctual. And if anybody's out there watching right now, I just want to make sure everybody can hear us. But I've got Al Scarborough with us, and it'll show on there eventually that he's my special guest today. We're going to talk about the Island Inn. And I was thinking it was his great-grandfather that built the Island Inn, but it was your grandfather.
My grandfather.
Charlie Scarborough.
That's how old I am.
He's got a birthday coming up, so we got to wish him happy birthday too. It's what, in April?
April 14th.
14th.
You can remember it's the day Abraham Lincoln was assassinated and the day the Titanic sunk.
The day of the Titanic. All right. April 14th. Remember Al Scarborough on his birthday. Al's daughter Kathy has Over the Moon, which is on British Cemetery Road. And was that house family house?
No, that was that house actually was moved from up at the pond.
It was moved from the pond, from Northern Pond?
Northern Pond.
We like to move houses around here. I'm just going to look and make sure. I haven't heard anybody say they can't hear us, so I think everybody's good. So, as you guys know who've been watching, we've been doing this fundraiser for the Island Inn Oddfellows Lodge. The property in my lifetime was known as the Island Inn. It was actually built as the Oddfellows Lodge in 1901.
Finished in 1901.
Finished in 1901. Yeah, it took a long time to get supplies, I would imagine.
Well, that's been a curiosity to me. I mean, obviously I wasn't alive in 1901, so anything I can relate would be something I've been told. And my father wasn't born until 1904.
So he was born after...
He was born after that. And I've often thought about how long it took to build something in those days. You didn't have electric saws, you didn't have nail guns. You had to do everything by hand. And 1901 is kind of significant because in 1899, there was a major hurricane on Ocracoke.
That's right, 1899. It was an unnamed storm, but it came through.
And so he must have started that building earlier than 1901.
Right.
And it's significant to me because in the 1899 storm, my grandparents' house floated away. Their house was located down where the Park Service Visitor Center is.
So if y'all know where the Park Service Visitor Center is, imagine in 1899, a tidal surge coming.
It washed that house away, and people always say, oh, there's never been any houses lost in Ocracoke, but that's not true. My grandparents' house floated away in the 1899 storm.
Were they in it?
No, I don't know where they were. But the only thing they salvaged was a pair of sterling silver pickle tongs. Huh. And I have those.
Cool.
Has my grandmother's initial on them, because they were a wedding gift. And it's so that was salvaged. That was found down there where Springer's Point is.
The pickle tongs were found down at Springer's Point?
Found.
And the house originally was where the ferry docks are, where the Park Service Visitor Center
Correct,
is.
Yeah. So sometimes, though, after that, he had to build a house for himself. He had to rebuild the house. And I remember that house because it was still standing when I was a boy. Because after the Navy took that property, my grandfather's house was used as the commander's residence.
So if you guys have been down to just giving a little more history for, I know where Al's talking about, down at the visitor center where the big cistern is, the big white cistern down there. If you are standing on Pilot Town Road as you're going to park to get on the ferry, if you look to the right, you'll see a Scarborough cemetery, and is that Susan?
No, that's my grandfather's father. That's my great grandfather. It says T.C. Scarborough, Thaddeus Constantine Scarborough, who was my great grandfather.
And so the house must have been right.
The house sat right there.
Right there.
About where there's a little amphitheater there with some benches.
Okay. So you guys have probably been down there. That is part of Al's history there. Okay.
So the connection then to the Island Inn, if you will, is he must have started building that Island Inn in 1900 at the earliest. And he had to build a house for himself. And he also, at that same time, after the 99 storm, built what locally is called the Barksdale House.
A lot of you probably recognize it. It's also been referred to as Ocracoke's favorite house. It's kind of in a way, a spooky looking house. Some people have said spooky. Across the harbor with the kind of gray shutters, big white, very...
Two-story house with the... most of you have seen it. If you've seen it at all, you've seen it with the shutters closed because it's used
by the family.
By the family only a few weeks out of the year. And that's the house, of course, that he put the trap door in the floor.
That was the very first one that had
and
that,
that was because his house had floated away in the 99 storm.
So some of you might know about trap doors or not. Some of the old houses, Dad's was cut in quickly, so his house didn't float away. But because he went by TC,
No,
or
Uncle Charlie, Mr. Charlie.
Oh, Mr. Charlie, right. I was back into your to your father, but his grandfather built the first house on the island with the trap door in the floor because in the 1899 storm, when the tide came up, the house was so low to the ground, it turned it into a houseboat, essentially.
Essentially, yeah.
Floated the house away, and he didn't want that to happen again, and he figured the way to keep that from happening was to have a trap door, let the water come into the house, and the house would stay on location, and he wouldn't have to chase his house around.
That house was built for my grandmother's sister's family.
Your grandmother's sister's family.
It would have been my grandfather, Mr. Charlie, brother-in-law.
Brother-in-law, okay.
Okay. And the house was designed after a house that had been seen in the West Indies, in Nevis.
I'd heard that story,
He sketched the house, he gave it to my grandfather, said, could you build me a house just like this?
Was he a captain or a captain?
Captain Dave.
So he was sailing around, saw this house, was impressed by it, and the rest of the people in Ocracoke were still impressed by it.
Originally it had porches all the way around. They washed off in the 1944
I was going to say, I've heard that story. The 44 storm took the porches off. And after Dorian, I don't know if y'all saw pictures, that house that they ended up tearing down on the corner of Creek Road, that porch got torn off. The house to the right of it got torn off. So when that water comes across, sometimes...
big things happen.
Yeah, big things happen. Scary things happen.
And that, just as an aside, I guess that house was... my father told me that my grandfather told him he built that house for $50.
Oh my gosh.
Including the cost of the materials. And that sounds ridiculous, but the average pay in those days was about 35 cents. So it didn't take a...
Didn't take a lot. Well, yeah.
He may have cut his brother-in-law a little slack, too. Anyhow.
That's pretty impressive. You can't do that these days.
Yeah. But back to the island Inn. So this is an era where my grandfather was building a house for his brother-in-law, a house for himself, and the Island Inn.
And all by hand.
All by hand.
No air gun or nail guns.
No nail guns, no electric saws. I don't know how they managed all that, quite honestly. And it seems to me it would take a year to build it today.
Well, I'm still working on rebuilding a year and a half after the storm, so I can see that, yeah. And
of course, we all know now today that house was not built where it's presently located.
Did you guys know that? I told you we like to move things. The Island Inn was built closer to the harbor, and it was around the 1920s, maybe? No, it had
1915, I think.
I was going to say it was before 1917, yeah. About 1915, they didn't have cars on the island.
There were any cars.
They didn't have hydraulic jacks on the island.
No. And it was sold, it had been Oddfellows Lodge, and it was sold to Benjamin O'Neill, I believe and he wanted to move it from where it was back to where it's presently located. And they asked my grandfather to move it. And my grandfather evidently took the job. Now, obviously, I didn't know anything about this. It was long before I was born, and it was before my dad was born. But I can remember my dad and Morris Bounce sitting on our front porch talking about it, things that they had heard about being moved. So what I'm going to relate now is hearsay, at least twice removed. But my father was not a man to make up things. He was a pretty stoic individual.
Straightforward, told it like it was.
And evidently, when it was time to move the house, my grandfather went to church on Sunday. And in those days, everybody, I suspect, in Ocracoke went to the church. And my grandfather made an announcement that he was going to be moving the lodge, as he referred to it, starting on Monday morning. And he needed all the help he could get. And he said, anybody here that wants to come and get it to work and be there tomorrow morning at sunup. Well, sunup came and there was a large gathering of men there, including one man who everybody knew was kind of a layabout that didn't do much work. And they asked my grandfather, they said, well, what's he going to do in this job? And my grandfather replied that, I've got everything ready. I've got a team of horses here, and I've got some logs that I've cut to roll it on. So that's all prepared. And we need somebody just to do all the complaining about the job. So he's going to sit on a stump over here, and he's going to complain about the pay being too low, the mosquitoes being too thick, being too hot, how they were doing it the wrong way, and the rest of you are going to, he's going to do the bitching for all of you. And everybody thought that was satisfactory, and he said he's going to get the same pay as the rest of you, 35 cents a day.
And they all agreed to that?
Evidently agreed to it. And they, my dad said that he'd heard it. It only took him 2 days to move it.
Wow.
But of course, that was just the 3-story center section.
And that's the part that we're trying to restore, that we've kind of deemed as the most historic and salvageable section of the island inn.
Yeah. And even looking at it today, I understand cutting the logs for rollers, but there was nothing substantial rolled on. It'd be like rolling that house across the beach.
I mean, even taking one of those big wheelbarrows out to the beach is hard to roll it across the sand. And I mean, when we walk around the village today, we see hard packed, for the most part, dirt and trees and grass, but there wasn't any of that then.
That wasn't true at that time. So that was when it was moved. Later, it was for a time a residence, but prior to the time it being the Oddfellows Hall, there was also a schoolhouse.
So the school was on the lower level, right? And the
evidently, I don't really know the answer to that, but I asked my dad one time if he ever went to school there. Of course, my dad was born in 1904, so it had been 19. It
was about 1917.
1916, 17, before he would be 10 or 12 years old.
And a lot of kids didn't go to school beyond that.
And when he did go to school, he went to high school. He went to school off the island, like a lot of men did, or a lot of children here did. So there was an era. The school wasn't built until 1917, I believe. Mm-hmm. So,
right.
So in that era, he wouldn't have gone to school there, and he wouldn't have gone to school at the other school, at the existing school.
Right. Yeah. So the Oddfellows Lodge was used as a school from 1901 to about 1917. Mm-hmm. Or thereabouts. And then the new school was built, it gets a little confusing. The new school was built in the location of where the
existing school is.
Except it's not existing now.
Except it went down in Dorian.
So at the end of School Road, at that loop, was where the new school was built in 1917. It was torn down in the mid or early 1970s. And that was the school that I went to and his daughters went to. And then they're just getting ready to rebuild a new school that had to get torn down because of Dorian.
Yeah. The history of hurricanes on Ocracoke resulted in the destruction of and rebuilding of many buildings, and also the moving of a lot of a building. And that's still going on today. Amy's house is being raised up, and everybody.
Kathy Perez had that house that Martha and Wilson had that moved to her new location. So it's nothing
new here to move a building. I don't know exactly how many, but every once in a while I come across the building, and when I ask about it, I find out that it was really built somewhere else.
Well, and I had talked to you and Dad at some point doing an overlay map. I would love to see where some of these houses were. Sorella's used to sit where Spencer's Market is. The old Assembly of God Church, that's now a rental out on the main road, used to sit where the current Assembly of God Church is.
There are, out on the main road coming in from Hatteras, I think the first three or first four residences have all been moved there.
The Carol Ritchie's place used to be down near
and the first
Howard
building,
Street.
The first building you occur on the right-hand side coming into Ocracoke, that was built originally over where the Ocracoke Horizons are.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was moved in the 70s, I believe, 1970s era. Maybe the 1980s.
That's a lot of work to move a house.
And then,
But when supplies are limited here, sometimes it's worth moving a house to save it and to...
right across from the variety store, next to the community center, there's a house in there. That house was moved from the location directly across from my daughter's shop.
Really?
Yes.
And is that where Elmo's is now?
Where Elmo's house is
Is
now.
now. Okay.
And the house that sat in that location, right next to what is the Pirates Chest today, the big red building. Okay.
Or what was Teach's Hole, now Blue Heron?
What is now Blue Heron. There was a house sitting there, and that house was moved, and it's behind the electric company.
Yeah, is that down Water-Fired Road?
No, on the other side.
Oh, okay.
On the what do they call that road?
I don't know.
Behind the Island Inn. If you go
Okay.
back in that area there.
Okay. So we move them all over the place. We can't even remember where they're all moving from. So that is part of the Island Inn's history too, having been moved and kind of changed what it is over the years too. It wasn't always a motel.
No, when I remember it earliest, probably, I'm going to say 47, 48, 1947, 48, 49, must have been that era. It's after the Second World War, and after the Second World War, there were 2 wings added to the building, and those wings were buildings that had been at the Navy base that were scavenged and brought down, moved down there and attached to the Island Inn.
So I knew the right-hand side was...
Well, the left-hand side, they might have built most of it.
And probably built over it. I know I talked to another local lady who had part of the barracks as her house, but it was unrecognizable because they built over top of it. And for those of you who've been to the Ocracoke Oyster Company, which is now gone, the building that it used to be in is gone and is where Wheelie Fun Rentals is now. That building was part of the Naval Barracks too, and it was moved multiple times.
Yeah, it was the recreation hall for the school at one time.
Yeah. It used to sit behind the school. The building that used to be the Ocracoke Oyster Company, and the Oyster Company still exists. It's just changed locations due to Dorian.
Yeah. And the other thing that happened that I remember about the Island Inn was, like I say, after sometime in the late 40s, maybe there was the downstairs portion on the right as you face the building that is now torn down, but that's where the dance hall was.
Oh, there was a dance hall there.
That was the main dance hall until the
Wayhead Village Hotel became.
Yeah, well, that was before the Wayhead Village Hotel. And I remember going there.
Or Old Jake's place, or we like to dance around here.
It was the Saturday night dance
spot. Okay.
And I remember going with my parents to that. But by the time I was a teenager, of course, they had moved to the Saturday night dance had moved into that building we just referred to that became Captain Ben's when it was behind the school. So. Everything on Ocracoke was used up
multiple times. That's cool. So now, I know the Cochrans, Bill and Ruth Cochran used to own the Island Inn. Mm-hmm. Did they just manage it for Stanley Wayhab, or did they own it? Do you?
Oh, I don't know that Stanley ever built that.
Okay.
I don't know who owned the...
I'll have to look at my history. I can't remember who's owned it over the years.
Stanley built... My grandfather built what is now Blackbeard's Lodge. He built that
too?
Yeah, he built that for Stanley Wayhab, but that wasn't until the 35, 36.
Yeah, I knew it was at least by 38 it was built. 30. Yeah. So, okay.
That's when he had the advertisement for it. It was the brand new hotel that had fans in every room, and it had a swimming pool that surrounded the building, and they changed the water twice a day when the tide came in and out.
That's called creative advertising.
And that was when the ad became, the Ocracoke was described as the Bermuda.
Of the U.S. That's right, not just at the Outer Banks.
And that was a Stanley Wayhab advertisement.
The Bermuda of the U.S. So, all right, and going back to Bill and Ruth Cochran, Bill was a
Pilot.
He did, what's it called? Not,
Sightseeing.
kind of acrobatics
Oh, yeah.
too, did he?
I don't know. That, when they were here, that would have been in the...
It was in the 50s?
I think so. I think more in the 50s.
I think you're right.
Yeah. And I think it was late 50s even. Because I think it was in the 60s when she had that shop.
Shell shop?
Shell shop.
She was an avid shell collector, and if you go to the Preservation Society Museum, you'll see her collection of shells that's there. It's really quite nice.
Yeah. And so that was late 50s, early 60s. I remember them being here, but I left in the 1960s. I was gone for 8 years, so
yeah,
that's a real blank in my history of Ocracoke.
A lot of men, generation of Al's dad, my grandfather, left Ocracoke in the early years and worked up north. So a lot of your childhood was spent up north.
All of my childhood was up north, yeah.
And then he came back, just like my dad did, moved back to the island to raise his family. But then you took time off to, well, even before you had kids in the 60s, you were abroad doing the...
I was with the Peace Corps for 5 years or so, yeah. Anyway, that's what I know about the Island Inn. And you can take it with a grain of salt, like most stories in Ocracoke. Your father always has a great line about telling stories. Do you remember?
There's a poor piece of cloth that can't take a little embroidery. So, Ocracoke, we like to tell the truth, and we also like to embroider. Exactly. And do you ever work for Kathy at the shop anymore?
Not anymore. I did a little bit at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you happen to go into Over the Moon and see this fellow there, wish him a happy birthday if it's on April 14th, and
do like your grandfather.
Give him a hug.
He was noted for telling all the pretty girls that came along that it was his birthday just so he could get a hug.
So it was his birthday often as he sat on the porch of the community store. And
I was there one morning when he told that to some woman, and she looked at him, she said, "I'll give you a hug, but you had a birthday a couple months ago when I was here."
So he was caught then. So thank you guys for listening. We are still doing this fundraiser. Oh, I've got a draw. Do you want to be my drawer?
Yeah, I'll draw.
We're picking names. We had one person in one of the higher regions here. So we've got reach in there. I've mixed them around. And then if your name is called, I will, and I'm sorry if I cannot pronounce names correctly, Penny Muslimani. I will be emailing you. You are a winner of the book Digging Up Uncle Evans. It has a story of the Island Inn, Mrs. Godfrey in it. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping Mrs. Godfrey likes the... All right, and then dig around in here and pick the next winner. And Suzanne Keller is the winner for the other one. Suzanne, I will be getting in touch with you too. That's a mystery pack of 4 Ocracoke goodies. So I'll talk to you and see kind of if I can cater it towards your interests of Ocracoke. So cool. And then Brant is the next winner. He was the one, I know that name. He was the one in one of the higher echelons here. So thank you guys for supporting this. It's the GoFundMe Save Ocracoke's Island Inn Oddfellow Lodge, and we've gotten over $6,000 of support. It's going to be a 6-week program. We're going to do prizes next week as well. I haven't figured out what they're going to be. And hopefully I'll talk to Chester Lynn, who used to run the restaurant there. I haven't talked to him yet.
He can embroider things too.
But we'll talk to him. So thank you guys for watching and listening to us.
Thank you.